Kevin Durant wants a trade from the Brooklyn Nets. This is something that I expected to happen eventually, like next offseason, maybe the offseason after. Obviously, the Kyrie drama has been a lot, but today he officially wants out of Brooklyn, and there's a lot to talk about there, including what got us here, where he could potentially go, what trade packages could be involved in the situation around Brooklyn in general, and of course, we're going to talk about all that today. So if you haven't watched this channel before, if this is your first video, you've only watched some of the recent ones, I am a Nets fan, by the way, in case you didn't know. And so this has been a really, really weird week, a weird last 18 months, last 24 months. And honestly, like my initial reaction to this was obviously like that's unfortunate. Like I've really enjoyed watching Kevin Durant play basketball. He's unbelievable. And I want him on my basketball team. But ultimately, it did kind of feel inevitable with the way that the Kyrie thing went, with the way the Harden thing went, that eventually this was going to fall apart, right? And now we're looking at a situation where I think it's a really interesting parallel to Russ and Paul George being traded from Oklahoma City, because in the past, when we see teams like this fall apart, guys leave in free agency or they just get old and you don't get a ton of return in exchange for them. But this is a situation where Brooklyn gets stuff for Harden, obviously Simmons in the picks. You're going to get a ton for KD, and then Kyrie is going to end up getting traded as well. You might trade Simmons in addition. So they're still going to be in a situation not like Oklahoma City is in now because they don't have their own draft picks because of the Harden trade, but they're going to get a lot in return for these guys. So let's talk about KD. We're going to probably do some trade machine content, over the next couple of days once we get some more information. And I'm assuming this isn't going to be a quick process. I would be surprised if it was. But some teams that came to my mind initially, this has been reported as well: Phoenix, Miami, funnily enough, a team like Golden State as well. But they've already made this clear through reports that Brooklyn's goal is they want to get the most out of Kevin Durant and then Kyrie as well in a trade. They're not interested in doing him a favor and sending him to a place that he wants to go. He's on a 3 or 4 year contract after this season. Like they have all the leverage here in terms of where they want Kevin Durant to go, because he's going to be under contract wherever he is traded to. So to me, that means that there's potentially some momentum here for a DeAndre Ayton trade. We've heard rumors about that possibility, except in exchange for like Joe Harris. So there's a possibility that KD wants to go to Phoenix and the trade is like Ayton, one of the wings like Bridges, Cam Johnson, and a ton of picks, maybe some other younger guys. Like whatever the trade is, Brooklyn is going to get a ton of picks, and they're going to get a ton, or they're going to get, at least 1 or 2 significant assets in terms of players in exchange for Kevin Durant as well. And then you have to deal with where to send Kyrie Irving as well, which we'll talk about a little bit later. If it was Miami, Tyler Hero would absolutely be involved in the trade. They would have to trade some future picks. Maybe Bam. I would be surprised if Bam was involved. But, I mean, if you have an opportunity to pair Kevin Durant with Jimmy Butler, that's something that you're really going to explore. But any of these teams that Kevin Durant is going to go to that he would like to play in, right? Phoenix, Miami, they're going to give up a significant amount of players, but they're not going to give up their stars, right? Like it's not going to be Devin Booker. It's not going to be Jimmy Butler. They're pairing him with somebody. And even though in the past we've gotten used to stars having the opportunity to kind of pick where they want to go, Kevin Durant's contract situation means that he doesn't have as much leverage there, other than just telling the team that he could potentially be traded to that he doesn't really want to go there. But the options, there should be a significant amount of options here, I feel like. Again, the funny thing is Golden State's actually perfect. Like they have the assets, they have the young guys, they have the picks. New York is a team to keep an eye on. I can't imagine Brooklyn would actually trade him and or Kyrie to New York. But they do have those future picks that they picked up on draft night. They do have RJ Barrett. They have Randall. They have some other guys, that could be interesting. That is certainly an option and a possibility. But again, my best guess here is just straight off of just an immediate reaction. This isn't going to be like a quick process. Like Kevin Durant's not going to be traded tomorrow, I don't think. They still have to kind of let the free agency dust settle. And again, they have this guy under contract. They have the asset under control. The season isn't about to start. It's very different than, for example, the Harden trade from Houston. And then, of course, we also have to talk about the Kyrie part of this, because now his decision to opt in is even more curious. It's been reported that Kyrie and KD have not communicated with the franchise at all, basically, since the season ended, since the Nets took kind of a hardline stance on not giving Kyrie long-term max money. And if Kyrie had just opted out, then he could have signed an MLE with whatever team traded for Kevin Durant, and then he could still go and play with his buddy. Like, they came to Brooklyn to play together, and the assumption is that those guys' relationship is still very, very close. I haven't seen anything to the contrary, and that they would still want to play together. And of course, Kyrie would have to take a pretty massive pay cut and take the $6 million, whatever MLE to make that happen. But ultimately, like, I think there should be some motivation of those guys to continue to play together, but you never know. And you think about those situations that he could possibly be traded to, Miami, Phoenix. Like, unless Brooklyn's getting back Chris Paul or Kyle Lowry in exchange for Kyrie Irving, it seems unlikely that these two guys are going to continue to play together, given the fact that Kyrie opted in, which again makes me think that either they're not on the same page here, or Kyrie just didn't want to take the $30 million pay cut, which I wouldn't blame him for not wanting to take it. But as we kind of look now at what this means for the Nets situation overall, I want to emphasize this. Obviously, I'm going to admit some bias here, right? Like, I'm going to be more optimistic than probably most fans would be because it is my team. But here's the deal. This, to me, doesn't feel like the sky is necessarily falling in terms of like they're going to be one of the worst teams in the league for the next 3 seasons. The Nets have no incentive whatsoever to be bad for the next 2 to 3 to 4 seasons. And they have, in my opinion, one of the most valuable trade assets, one of the most valuable trade requests in league history in Kevin Durant. And this is a situation that I think matches up more similarly to what happened with Oklahoma City when they traded Russ and they traded Paul George than it does what happened to Brooklyn the first time when they traded for Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, guys like that. They traded for aging players then, players that by the time it was clear it was falling apart did not have trade value to the franchise, and then ultimately they were unable to become a half-decent team and ended up giving away all these picks to, in that case, Boston. In this case, it would be Houston. Like, if we're looking at 5 years from now, yeah, that could be a concern, but Simmons could play and be healthy, and or you could trade him. You can open up some flexibility to sign some free agents. And I'm telling you, whatever the Kevin Durant trade package is, it's going to be significant. And it's not just going to be picks. They are going to get real players in exchange because a ton of teams are going to be interested. And there's no reason for them to be bad. If they had all of their future picks, like let's just say that they never made the Harden trade and they still have like Jared Allen and Karis LeVert and those guys on the roster. In that scenario, I could see them going through with a plan that involves dumping Kevin Durant, dumping Kyrie for just all of the future stuff. Like, let's just be bad. Let's go try and get Vic this upcoming season and try and get, a high pick in this draft and tank, and we'll turn it around. That's not where they are. They don't have access to their own picks for the next 5 seasons. And as a result, they're going to try and get, for example, Mikal Bridges and some stuff, or maybe New Orleans jumps in here. You're trying to get Brandon Ingram and some stuff. You're trying to get Tyler Hero and some stuff. Like players that are going to help you still be competent alongside Ben Simmons or whatever you trade Simmons for. And that's also going to be the case for Kyrie. We've seen over the last week that Kyrie's trade value doesn't really seem to be all that significant, but they're still going to try and get something for him because I don't think he's going to want to just play out his one season in Brooklyn now that he's opted in without Kevin Durant there. And again, I would expect Durant to be traded before the season starts. So from what we know right now, this is what I would keep an eye on over the next couple of days to week and a half. It seems like Miami and Phoenix are the 2 teams that are going to be near the top of the list for Kevin Durant. And in that scenario, it would involve Miami trading, Hero, and probably Hero on a new contract, maybe Duncan Robinson to make the salaries work, and a ton of first-round picks. Maybe Bam is involved in that trade, but some combination of assets that's, Hero, Robinson, Bam, and they can trade 3 future first-round picks, according to Zach Lowe, in a trade. That still, honestly, to me, doesn't feel like enough, but it's pretty close. Obviously, Bam and Hero together is enough, but if you're taking 2 out of 3 of those guys, it's going to be something similar to that, I think, if he does end up in Miami. Whereas in Phoenix, which is a really weird request, in my opinion, it's a team that just flamed out in the playoffs, a team with a questionable ownership situation, a team that you don't know if they're going to be willing to spend in a way that would allow you to win a title. But if it was Phoenix, it would probably involve DeAndre Ayton. My best guess would be that one of the wings, Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges, would also have to be involved. And a ton of future picks as well. I'd have to check and see what their pick situation is, given the fact that they owed Oklahoma City. I think they might owe Oklahoma City 1 more pick, so they might also only be able to trade 3 firsts or some swaps, whatever the case may be. You can always up the the offer with some swaps as well. But they're not just going to trade them for picks, especially when it's those 2 teams that have the assets. And we could be looking at a situation where next year it's Chris Paul, it's Devin Booker, and it's Kevin Durant, and whatever big Phoenix decides to sign. That's a pretty good team. Or you could be looking at a situation where Miami has, Lowry, JB, KD, maybe they keep Bam and some other stuff. And that's obviously a fantastic situation as well. Last thing I'll leave you with here. Yeah, this kind of sucks, right? I've been looking forward to watching these guys play. Once they made the Harden trade, it was an incredible team to watch. However, In the situation in which Kyrie and KD decide to leave, I would prefer it to be in this scenario where you're getting trade value in exchange. And the bullet that Brooklyn dodged here was Kevin Durant signing an extension last offseason, because he didn't need to do that. You saw that with Kyrie. You saw that with James Harden. He did not need to sign that long-term extension. If he hadn't, he would have been able to opt out this offseason and Kyrie at the same time, and they could have just reset their 2019 free agency and potentially gone to, for example, the Knicks. That happening and Kevin Durant signing that extension before this past season saved Brooklyn from that Boston scenario that they experienced a decade ago. That's not where they are. They're not going to be very good over the next couple of seasons in terms of where they could have been over the last few. But given the return they're going to get in exchange for Kevin Durant, I would be very, very surprised if they aren't at least somewhat of a borderline playoff team next season. If they get back Ayton or Hero, whatever they can get in exchange for Irving, they're still going to try and set themselves up pretty well. The NBA is just out of control, man.